The information shared on the Allo podcast is not intended as medical advice. Your medical care decisions should be made in consultation with your physician who is familiar with your specific case.
Hi, welcome to the Allo podcast from the Allo Hope Foundation. I'm Bethany Weathersby.
And I'm Molly Sherwood.
And today's episode is all about Let me try again. This word haunts me. It will haunt me.
I know.
Why
did they have to name it this? We have to say it all the time.
I don't know. That's why I shortened it to Allo for the Allo Hope Foundation, because I'm like, I can't ever say that word again.
Thank you for doing
that.
We are. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. All right. Today's episode is all about alloimmunization for friends and family, which we're both really excited about having here with us. And we've actually been wanting to do this for a while, right, Molly?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm really excited about this. I mean, this will be a resource that I wish I could have given to my friends and family during my alloimmunized pregnancies. So anyway, we'll dive in a minute. But usually we check in with each other to see how we have been carrying on today.
Yes, sorry. I'm getting...
So how was your morning?
Oh, 5 kids. That's how it was.
That's all that needs to be said.
Well, this morning was very cool outside compared to normal May in Alabama. And so I was out there reading my Bible early this morning before any of the kids woke up. And I was like, they need to be out here enjoying this beauty of nature, and only like in the 70s or so. And so, so I made them all, when they woke up, come outside on the front porch and have a picnic breakfast on the front porch.
Oh my gosh,
they were not happy
you're so
about
cool.
It.
Oh,
they were not. No, they were angry and tired and wanted to stay in their blankets. And I was like, come and expose yourself on the porch to the nature. And I thought it was great until August. The 3-year-old just started peeing in the front yard as the neighbor was saying good morning to us. So that's how that went.
I've had to explain to my kids.
It was good.
That overall. Also, kudos to you for trying to pull off an activity before school. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I rarely can
very
pull that
last
off.
minute.
That's the way to do it, We were having our usual battles over yogurt pouches in my house this morning because yogurt pouches are like gold in my house. They're also really expensive. So I don't have that many. There's limited resource. They must know. Yeah. They're like, please, I only want the most expensive yogurt product that exists. That's
I think
what
they
I
can
want.
Taste it. They're like, this tastes expensive. I want more.
Caviar taste for yogurt. But my kids, they started doing this thing where after they finish their yogurt pouch, they will blow it up and reinflate it and then put it in the fridge for the next kid to come. And then that kid, it just depends on his vibe that morning. Like sometimes he's like, haha, you got me. And sometimes he's like, I'm going to destroy you today for doing that to me. So, it's normal.
That's really smart. I love it. I feel like we just do the Go-Gurts that there's no reattachable top.
Oh man.
The
really
poor man's yogurt pouch is what we do. Yeah. So
yes.
It's the Aldi brand, by the way. It's not actually Go-Gurt. It's Aldi brand.
Hey, don't
yogurt sleeve.
Yeah. I love Aldi though. This is not a paid advertisement for Aldi.
I love Aldi so much. I do. No hate that we survive off of Aldi.
Just make sure you got your quarter with you. That's all you need.
Anyway.
Okay, let's continue.
True. All right. I love it. So now we've shared about our family. So let's talk about the families and friends of our alloimmunized patient community who are so important, especially during I can't say it. I can't say the word. Especially during a high-risk pregnancy, that community is so, so vital. So I'm really excited to be talking to the friends and family, the community.
Totally agree.
Okay.
We actually had several patients request that we do an episode that they could share with their loved ones that addresses what alloimmunization and HDFN are and how they can best support alloimmunized moms they know. And we thought, such a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So on that note, if you are a family member or a friend of an allo mom, welcome. This is for you. And we're so glad that you're here. And I really think that the fact that you are here listening to this episode speaks volumes. I think it shows how much you really care about supporting your loved one through this. So from fellow patients, thank you so much for being here. And the plan for this episode is to start off by explaining alloimmunization and HDFN, hemolytic disease of the fetus and newborn, very generally, and just talk about what those conditions are and what everything means for the mother and for the family affected by the disease. And then let's talk about the best ways to support someone who's actually going through this.
Yeah, I think one of the best ways to support an allo mom is by learning about her condition and trying to better understand what she is going through. So just listening to this episode is an act of supporting her. So for a more in-depth look at alloimmunization and HDFN, you can definitely tune into the very first episode of season 1, where you can listen to all the episodes of season 1 is sort of where we kind of teed up all the general categories of monitoring and treatment and what it looks like for this disease. And to give a little background about our approach to this, we should probably acknowledge that we are both alloimmunized mothers ourselves. I have maternal alloimmunization, which means I developed antibodies against red blood cells that don't match my own. And we'll explain more about that in a minute. But for me, my antibody levels, which we also call titers, stayed low. And my children did not require any treatment for my disease, for which I am so thankful every day. And I was still monitored very closely and dealt with some pretty incessant anxiety and PTSD from experiences throughout my pregnancies, both related and unrelated to this condition. So you may know someone in my situation who has antibodies but doesn't end up needing treatment or losing a child to this condition. And so I share my ideas here from that lived experience, and Bethany shares hers from a different side of the spectrum. So you should probably touch on your experience as an alloimmunized mother too.
Yeah, okay. I'll do my best to condense it because it's long. Because there's a lot of babies, lots of babies. But yes, I'm an alloimmunized mom. And unlike Molly, I've always had very, very high antibody levels or titers. And that just meant that I had very severe disease in every alloimmunized pregnancy. My daughter Lucy died halfway through my first alloimmunized pregnancy because we did not have that close monitoring and well-timed treatments that we needed. And we'll talk more about those later. But my husband and I really wanted a large family, and we desperately wanted more kids, even though we were told that we couldn't have any more living children after Lucy died. But with the help of expert medical teams out of state and the right medical care, we went on to have 3 healthy babies. That's the 3-year-old is one of those who's peeing in the front yard when we're supposed to have a nice, pleasant breakfast. And so throughout those pregnancies, I ended up actually counseling and supporting thousands of alloimmunized moms through my personal blog. And that eventually led to the creation of the Allo Hope Foundation. So now the Allo Hope Foundation runs this podcast, and we also do individual patient support to many, many allo patients around the world. We speak globally at medical conferences about proper management and patient needs for our disease. We do a lot of research and a lot of education, and we support women in underserved areas who have limited access to affordable, life-saving medical care that they need. That's something we're very, very passionate about.
We have the best job ever. And that was you summed it up pretty well, but it's actually a lot of stuff and it's so special.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Digging right in. Me too. And we get to do this. Just hang out together with microphones in our faces.
It's so fun. Yes.
Okay. So,
cameras too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Cameras too now this season. All right. So digging in, let's talk about maternal alloimmunization and HDFN, which is sometimes called RH disease. That's kind of an older term, but some people know it in that way. So keeping it to the basics, this condition happens when the mother is exposed to a blood type that is different from her own. And it usually happens during a previous pregnancy or a blood transfusion, but sometimes even from exposure to their baby's blood during their first pregnancy. And after that exposure, her immune system notices that blood and thinks it's something dangerous, like a virus, even though it's not. And the body responds by creating antibodies. So it's the same type of process as developing antibodies after being exposed to the flu or whatever. But this happens to foreign blood that isn't the same type as her own.
Right. And then when that happens, it's called maternal alloimmunization. And then those antibodies that her immune system created actually are not dangerous to her. It's actually just a normal part of her immune system doing what it does. But then if she gets pregnant and her developing baby has that same foreign blood type that her antibodies are designed to destroy, you can see why that would be a problem, and there's risk involved for the developing baby. So during pregnancy, those maternal antibodies can go through the placenta to the baby, and they can destroy the baby's red blood cells, and that causes anemia if you don't have enough red blood cells. And so when that happens to the baby, that disease is called hemolytic disease of the fetus and newborn, or HDFN for short. And also in the past, I believe it was referred to as RH disease, but that's a bit outdated now.
Yeah. So yes, the mom has alloimmunization and it can cause HDFN in the baby. So the baby could have HDFN. And a lot of people ask when they first find out about this if it can be prevented. So to quickly address that part, a lot of times when I tell somebody about this condition, they say, oh, that's when you have a negative blood type, right? And that is partly true. So people with a negative blood type are missing the D antigen on their blood cells. And if they get pregnant with a baby that has a positive blood type, that means they do have the D antigen on their blood cells. And the mom's immune system might recognize that and create anti-D antibodies. There actually is a prevention for this, and it's called Rh immune globulin, or sometimes known as RhoGAM. And many people have heard of this, especially if they know someone who has a negative blood type or they do have a negative blood type. It's an injection for Rh negative women that they should receive during pregnancy and then right after birth to prevent them from developing these antibodies so they don't develop this disease. But right now, that's the only way to prevent alloimmunization, but it's not foolproof, and that's why people still can have this condition.
And actually, that medication, the injection, Rh immune globulin, or we also call it RhoGAM, it's not always accessible in certain parts of the world, or we've seen in other countries it can be extremely expensive. Also, this medication, it only prevents one type of antibody, which is anti-D, which is the most prevalent. But there are so many other antibodies that mothers can develop, and those are not preventable at all, like the ones that you and I have, Molly. Mm-hmm. And so the main thing to remember is that this condition is not the mother's fault. It's not the father's fault. It's just something unfortunate that happens.
Yes, such an important point. Like I have anti-E and anti-S antibodies. You have anti-K and isn't it FYB, right?
JKB, I think.
JKB.
JK,
anyway,
yeah.
There's a lot of them out there. Okay, so those are just some examples.
Yeah,
so it's just something that happened to us during our pregnancies, and there's nothing we could have done to prevent it in our cases. Mm-hmm. So, okay, moving on to a mom who now has this condition. So during an alloimmunized pregnancy, the developing baby is at risk for hemolytic anemia, which is essentially, like you said, Bethany, severe life-threatening lack of blood. And then after birth, the baby could be at risk for continued anemia and jaundice. which is called hyperbilirubinemia. And thankfully, in most cases, these risks or complications are temporary and treatable with the right doctor and the right care. But this is a rare condition, which means providers rarely treat it, and they usually don't have an opportunity to become experts in the management of this disease.
Right. And that often means that the mother and the baby don't always receive the right monitoring or treatment. And that creates this very, very stressful situation for the mother because she's concerned, obviously, about her baby's health and safety and doesn't feel like she has the power to protect her baby. And it's not just the monitoring and treatment that might be subpar. A lot of mothers don't even receive the right information about their condition. And so they're kind of left adrift, not knowing what to expect, not really knowing what's going on in their own body. And that's really hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you know someone going through this, expect her to be very overwhelmed by the road ahead of her. And in terms of monitoring for her, that can include frequent blood draws to check the antibody levels, which we call titers. It can include weekly specialty ultrasounds called MCA Doppler ultrasounds, and that's what is used to monitor the baby for anemia. Many extra appointments, traveling long distances to expert providers. That's likely to be happening even if the baby doesn't get sick enough to need treatment. And then if she or her baby does need treatment, Bethany, maybe you should walk through what that can potentially look like.
Yeah. Okay. And all of my babies needed treatment. They needed intervention in utero in order to survive. And so the treatment for this disease during pregnancy is, well, you're treating that fetal anemia, right? That's the problem. Remember, the mother is not sick, but the baby becomes anemic. And so just like on the outside, you can treat that fetal anemia by giving the baby a blood transfusion, except the problem is the baby is inside the mother. And so that makes it a lot harder on everyone. But yes, those are called intrauterine blood transfusions. And that's the treatment for babies with HDFN who become anemic in utero. And it really is quite mind-blowing that they can even do that because this baby is so small. I mean, Dr. Moise did a blood transfusion that was successful on a baby that weighed 6 ounces.
That's crazy.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How do you even make that happen in your brain? Like, I can't even visualize that, but it's amazing. They put this long needle through the mother's abdomen, and then they transfuse donor blood into the developing baby, and then that alleviates that anemia for a few weeks, and then those intrauterine blood transfusions continue every 2 or 3 weeks until delivery. And there are some risks that come with that procedure, of course, just like any procedure done during pregnancy. And I actually have had 16 IUTs total.
Yes, you are. That is nuts. Resident queen over here.
Yeah.
But I do, but I think it's
against my will.
I know. But to add, like, I think we should frame that not every baby needs that type of monitoring or intervention. So most alloimmunized women will not need an intrauterine transfusion during their pregnancy, but probably around 20 to 25% will. Another tricky thing about the IUT procedure is that it has to be done at the right time. So once a baby is anemic, they usually need to do the transfusion the following day or the day after that. So can you imagine how much time the mother is spending at the doctor's office, finding childcare for other children, and just watching and anticipating for the baby to get sick enough to need that procedure? And some moms with very high antibody titers or who have lost a baby before may also be receiving infusions every week in the beginning of their pregnancy to help reduce her antibody levels and delay the baby's illness. And those treatments are exhausting. They come with some really unpleasant side effects. And all alloimmunized moms, regardless, are looking at an early scheduled delivery, like 37 to 38 weeks at the latest, but sometimes earlier, depending on the baby's health.
Right. And then there's that whole time period after birth. And so let's look at that really quickly. how does this affect the baby after they're born? If the baby is receiving very close monitoring and timely treatment, then the baby will eventually just outgrow the disease and have no lasting effects. Everything will be fine. But it's also important to mention that HDFN is not just a risk for the baby in utero. There are risks that come after the baby is born. And a lot of babies are not affected during pregnancy, but then they are affected after they're born. Another thing to remember is that when the baby is born, the mom's antibodies actually stay in the baby's blood for up to 12 to 15 weeks after birth. And so even though they are out of that dangerous environment, they are still at risk because those maternal antibodies are still in their system. And then during that time, they're dealing with potentially developing anemia. They might need blood transfusions, and then they have to be very, very closely monitored for high bilirubin, and that can become jaundice, hyperbilirubinemia, and that's when the skin kind of turns a yellowish color. And then if that high bilirubin is not treated quickly enough or efficiently enough, or sometimes it's not treated at all, that can result in brain damage, and then it can also result in death, again, if it's not treated. And so we kind of do feel comfortable with the term jaundice, I think, because it's actually a very normal newborn thing. I mean, my 2 babies before I even had antibodies did have some jaundice. But that's a different cause of that jaundice, and it acts in a different way. This type of jaundice can be very, very aggressive and needs to be closely watched. And so it comes with more risks.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm glad you said that. So this is a lot. And if the mom understands her disease, if she understands her disease well, she also understands that things can change unexpectedly and that there's very often little indication of how much treatment her baby is going to need until it suddenly presents itself. So she's probably living in a state of fear about her baby's health every day without being able to prevent or control much of anything. And so just consider that it might be very hard for her to focus on daily tasks or even to think about anything other than this. I mean, that was true for me. I'm sure it was for you as well. And the whole experience is really hard for the mother, her partner, their children. And honestly, it's tricky for the whole extended family too, in some ways. But the mom having a friend or family to understand to the extent that they can ask informed questions and offer support is really life-changing and something that she will never forget.
Totally agree. It's a very confusing, complex, rare disease. And the mother does have to have faith in her providers who are managing the pregnancy, because she really does not have the power herself to make her antibody levels go down or, protect her baby from getting sick or protect her baby from needing treatment. That's really out of her power. And so it is hard to not be able to do that as a mother. But that's why this relationship with the doctor is very, very important. But I know that a lot of alloimmunized moms suddenly find themselves responsible for researching and educating themselves about this disease and then advocating for the right care day after day. And that's very, very draining. It's exhausting. And again, the reason they have to do this is because the care within most developed countries, and of course around the world, is just, it's very inconsistent. And the mother ends up shouldering that responsibility of making sure her baby's receiving the right care. Because if she doesn't, the baby could actually not survive if the right care is not given. And that's a lot to carry as a mother.
Yeah. And we were thinking that, on that note, people listening might be wondering what the likelihood is that a baby could die from HDFN. And I will say that before there was any monitoring or treatment for this disease, the survival rate was about 50%. And that still is true in some parts of the world where there is no monitoring and treatment. But now, in the very, very best centers in the world, the survival rate is more like 98%. And those babies usually have no long-term effects after they survive HDFN. But those good rates are highly contingent on receiving the right care. And, that unknown is challenging for the mother.
Yeah, actually, that's kind of the perfect segue into the effects on the mother that this condition can have. So I like that we just looked at the survival rate, which is really, really high in most cases. But how does this affect the mother? Even though it's not physically harmful to her, it has a huge impact.
Yeah, we have actually surveyed alloimmunized mothers and we published on this, which we can link to in the show notes. But we asked 127 moms with this disease, and 91% reported anxiety, 75% reported guilt, isolation, 71%, and 68% reported depression, 61% reported symptoms of PTSD, which is just astronomically high. It's multiple times higher than anything else I've seen for moms, even moms admitted to the hospital for around the clock watch for a high risk pregnancy.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I've heard those numbers before, but I am always shocked. They are sobering every single time I hear them. And I think that this is probably the most overlooked aspect of this disease is this heavy burden that is placed on the mother. And we see it, we've experienced it ourselves, but we also see it on a regular basis in the patients that we support and have relationships with. And I remember feeling so incredibly isolated during my first alloimmunized pregnancy, especially when I didn't have any type of community, real life or online. And I felt like I was alone and fighting for my baby's life. I was trying to understand this complex disease that my doctors couldn't really give me information on. I was terrified. But then once I found this online community of other patients, it was a huge relief because then I felt, okay, I'm not alone. But I did always kind of wish that my real in-person, real life community could have a better understanding of what I was going through, because that's who I'm actually dealing with in real life on a regular basis. And I did wish that they knew what was happening with me.
Yeah, hopefully that's what this episode will do.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a common question that comes up, or a common experience for alloimmunized moms. So I want to ask you, knowing all of this, some people would ask, why even go through it? So I'm sure you have insights on that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, a lot of women don't even know that they have this until they're pregnant. And then that's often how they find out in that first trimester blood testing. And so, most of the time the women don't know that they have antibodies. And so they're already pregnant. Okay. But then in other instances, the women do know that they have antibodies, and then they choose to still have another baby or get pregnant again or have another 3 babies like me.
Like
even
someone.
in severe circumstances.
Like some people here.
And yeah. But you know what? However many pregnancies they want, I do think it's really a wonderful gift to have friends and family who support us in those decisions. And I remember really appreciating my family and my friends who allowed me and Josh to make those decisions about growing our family for ourselves, and then respected our choices. And I'm also remembering the many, many comments that were made when people didn't think that it was the right choice for us. They didn't understand why we so desperately wanted more living children, because we already had 2 healthy boys before I even developed these antibodies. And then Lucy died, and we desperately wanted more kids. And people had a problem with that. They didn't like the idea that we had 2 healthy children and we were pursuing adoption, or we were, stepping into this high risk pregnancy to have another baby when we already had 2. And, yeah, that was just an added burden onto a very, very stressful situation, and a lot of grief, a lot of kind of lost dreams. So we're dealing with all of this. We're trying to decide how much risk are we going to take on, and really educating ourselves, setting up treatment plan. And then it was just so much to have to deal with those comments from the people that we love most. And so the people who did just support us, even if they had a different opinion, but they just respected our decisions, I appreciate them so much. And so I think that's one of the best gifts that we can give to others is respect that, and then be supportive in whatever they choose. Yeah. What do you think about all that, Molly?
I agree with you. I'm so glad that you added that in. I think that's a great sort of concrete piece of advice. You know, if a mom might not know she has this condition until she's pregnant, firstly, but if she does and she continues to get pregnant again, that's a choice that she and her family made, and that's a choice for them and them only.
Right. And I mean, we all want different things, right? We all have different ideas of what like the perfect family size might be, or what you and your partner are hoping for. And that's fine. Like, it's okay for us to have different dreams, right? Yeah.
So I also want to hear a couple suggestions. So we asked other alloimmunized moms in our community some practical ways that family and friends can support them, and their families through their pregnancy and afterwards. So let's see. I'm going to read the first one. So the question we asked was, what's the best way someone supported you through your alloimmunized pregnancy? And this is from an anonymous patient in the United States who we will just call Liz. And she's currently pregnant. And she says, my mom and a few of my amazing friends have taken turns coming over every few weeks and stocking my freezer with breakfast, lunch, dinners, and snacks. This has been so practical and helpful for our family. I am at the hospital 20 plus hours a week, receiving treatments and going to appointments, which keeps me and my husband very busy on top of our regular jobs and day-to-day responsibilities.
Whoa.
I also have a lot of physical side effects from the treatments that leave me not feeling well. She says, if I could give one suggestion for how to support someone going through a health event or grief, it's to bring them food. Besides checking dietary restrictions, don't even ask what they want. When you're in survival mode, it's too overwhelming to try and think of meal ideas and requesting specifics or feeling needy. So you could offer, I want to bring you food. Would you like meal A or meal B? And does Tuesday or Wednesday night work best? Love it.
I love it. I love that so much. First of all, I also love food, but it is so helpful when you have children to feed and a family, and then that's the last thing you want to attend to when you're feeling exhausted and sick and overwhelmed. And I love the part about not asking what they want and attempting to lessen the overwhelm. I think that would be so helpful.
Can I add to that? Sorry, I have one more of my
Please
own. I'm
do.
volunteering my own feedback. Something that I find I know sometimes people say I've been guilty of this. Everyone I know has been guilty of this, saying, let me know if you need anything. Let me know if I can help. That is, of course, I'm sure that comes from the heart. I've said it too. But few people might take you up on that. They don't want to feel like they're putting you out. So what this mom framed of saying, I would like to do something. Can I help with this or can I help with that? So it's giving the option of, I'm going to help you. Here's a couple choices. Unless the person explicitly refuses, so just offer it up instead of saying, let me know if I can help. That's a little bit of a passive way. And the recipient might not feel comfortable taking you up on that. So I just wanted to put that language out there.
Very, very good. And I just want to say that you guys were so good at that all last year, Molly. For our listeners, my husband had colorectal cancer and he was going through treatments all last year. And of course, I was so overwhelmed trying to care for everyone and do everything. And my Allo Hope team was amazing. They would say, hey, we're sending you dinner. We're doing this. just so supportive, and that helped so much. And they didn't make me make another choice. It wasn't like, okay, make some choices about, what you want or what we can do. It was just like, hey, we're going to do this. And then I didn't have to think about it. And it was wonderful. So thank you for that, Molly.
Aww. That's sweet.
Yeah. Okay. So I remember how helpful it was when my family or my friend Emily helped with childcare. That was it. Just that one thing was incredibly helpful and necessary. And so they were always willing to help with the kids. If there was a last minute appointment or something we needed, they just stepped right up. And so that was great. If your loved one has young children or any children, just offer to help. And I think that they would really appreciate it. Let's look at our next patient response. This is from Julia, and she is also in the U.S. And so she said what helped her was that her loved ones brought meals and prayed. They continued to contact her and ask her how she was doing through the whole thing. And they learned with her, and they were just there to listen. And her baby is now 3 years old.
Oh, I love that. You know what? I love how she touched on how they continued to check in. And it's super easy to forget as a support person, because you have your own life that's carrying on. But this woman who's going through her alloimmunized pregnancy is still going through this for the whole pregnancy, several months after birth, and then they'll still be processing the experience for years. And it's going to shape the way that she parents and views her life. And so setting a reminder in your calendar even to check in with that mom is a great idea, because life is busy and time moves quickly. And so even people with the best intentions, it's easy to forget to check in,
I love that, especially the setting a reminder step. That's really great.
Or even like if someone mentions, oh, I have my next doctor's appointment is on Tuesday, pop it in your calendar. So-and-so's appointment is on Tuesday. Text that morning, hey, thinking about you for your appointment today,
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Love it.
I was thinking what I would add for me, and I kind of want to say this as a way to empower the listener to do this. Something that was the most helpful was when people I loved took the time to learn about the disease. I loved when they asked me questions, even if they maybe seemed dumb or if they're just trying to ask for clarification so they could understand.
Yeah.
I was always happy to talk about it because it was all I could think of anyway. It wasn't like I wasn't thinking about it till they brought it up. So, knowing someone took the time to ask questions and understand meant so much to me. So don't hold back on that. And if anyone wants to learn more on their own, they can always go to our website, just search the Allo Hope Foundation, read some books there's not many books about it, but find a book. No, I don't know. Just look at the website for a foundation, basically.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Just read the website.
Anyway, start with that.
Yeah. I love that idea. And I also loved talking about it when people would ask me questions or even just show a tiny bit of interest in what was happening. That felt really good to me because, again, like you were saying, our lives are kind of revolving around this. We're thinking about it all the time. And so it's just nice for someone to ask questions and kind of enter into it with us so we don't feel so alone. Yeah. Okay. One last thought from me before we wrap it up. I wanted to say that I know that a family is kind of this living, moving thing where we are in relationship with each other. It can be really complex. It can be difficult, and we are all kind of leaning on each other in different ways and supporting each other in different ways. And so my encouragement to the family and friends of alloimmunized mothers is to try to have grace, show grace towards others in the family during this really stressful pregnancy and afterwards. And by that, I mean that I think maybe the allo mom, maybe the normal things that she did for you before this, or the normal relationship that you guys have, it might not be normal for that time, during the pregnancy, afterwards, and when she's healing from all of that, she's probably going to be out of commission. And so that is not because she doesn't love you anymore, or she doesn't, want to play her part at all. It just means that she is dealing with something that's incredibly difficult, incredibly stressful, and honestly quite traumatic. And she is doing her very best to protect her baby. And that's probably what most of her focus is on during that. And so I think that having that in mind, it's really helpful to just remember that. And then things will get back to normal, I think, after she's like, in a different space, after everything's kind of in the past. But I think that's really helpful to keep that in mind. And then also another thing that I was thinking of is, I think I've talked about the circle of grief. At least that's what I call it, when something
I love that concept.
Terrible happens. Yeah. So if someone loses, let's say someone loses a child, they're in the center of the circle, and you can imagine these bigger circles going around that central person. And so, kind of going out of that circle, I'm not explaining it well, but I think the person who's in the trauma and the loss is right at the center of the circle. And then the further out you get, there's grandparents, and then there's cousins, and then there's, it kind of goes out in the circles. And so in these situations, it's always helpful to think about support in and then complaining out. So if you're complaining about your grief, like the loss is really hard for you, you wouldn't want to go tell that to the person who's in the center of the circle. That's not your role. Your role is to tell someone further out in the circle. And then when you're looking at the person who's in the center of the trauma and the loss, think about supportive things that you can do and say. And so I think it's helpful to think of the allo mom in the same way. She's at the center. And so if you can, during this time, think of support in, complaining out, that might be really helpful.
I love that. You're such a good educator with you have awesome mnemonics and visuals. It's so good. I'm glad you put that in there. I just think in
pictures and graphs. And then also I want to say one last thing too.
Go for
something
it.
That our family, because we have a big family, there's 5 kids. So there's 7 people in our immediate family. And so we have this kind of concept that whoever is the most vulnerable family member at the time, that's the person who we focus on most. That's who gets the top priority when it comes to time and effort and generosity and whatever they need. It's the most vulnerable person. So all last year it was Josh, my husband, because he was going through cancer treatments. And so it kind of rotates around. And so our kids know this. And so it kind of alleviates that feeling of like, why are we all doing everything for daddy? Why are we like shaping our entire lives around what daddy needs? Because they know that it's temporary, because right now he's the most vulnerable person. And then eventually he'll get stronger. And then if they're in a spot where they are the most vulnerable or the most needy, they're going to really appreciate everyone kind of coming around them and supporting them in that way. And so maybe it's good to think of the allo mom in that way of, okay, let's do what we can right now for her in her moment of need. And I can tell you from experience, even the smallest act of kindness or generosity in that moment of need, it can affect that person for a lifetime. It has such a huge impact. And it's just, I'm so grateful for the people who showed me kindness and generosity when I needed it the most.
I feel that I'm about to tear up. I'm thinking about different ways that people, I'm trying not to, keeping it together. We made it through the whole episode. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that
but
is good.
It is, those moments of outreach are very memorable. And I think, I've learned over time, if I'm having a thought of, I'm thinking about this person today because this reminded me of this experience they had or whatever, send the text, make the call, just say it.
Yes.
Just say it. I've never had it backfire. Never. It's something that person will remember.
So true.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to do something that we don't usually do. So hopefully it is well received, but Before we close, I want to add something in that we haven't done in previous seasons, but we're going to try to just sprinkle it in sometimes in this season. So if anyone listens to these episodes all the way, they will hear that we receive a sponsorship to cover part of the costs of this podcast, like for the production. It doesn't cover costs for us to actually do it. It doesn't include all the other incredible work the foundation does. And I think I have to say this because otherwise people don't know how important donations are for us, because we're a small organization. And when a donation comes in, we see it personally, the handful of us, and we discuss it and we allocate it to certain buckets for supporting women and families experiencing this disease. So we will literally talk amongst ourselves and decide we're going to send $60 here and there to a woman in Kenya because she can't afford her anti-D injection to prevent this disease. We use our donations. We use our donations to make it possible to print and ship resource booklets to patients and doctors for free. We use them to support to sustain our social media, our information sheets, our educational sessions that we advertise and we give to patients at clinicians at no charge. So donations are so special and so valued, and we see them. So I think we should include a link in the show notes about how to donate. It's also, readily available on our website, which we will list in our outro that we always do.
Yes. Okay.
So you want to do the honors?
Right. I'll do it. Okay. Whether you are a patient, provider, or otherwise affected by antibodies in pregnancy, we are here for you. We have great resources on our website at allohopefoundation.org. That's allo spelled ALLO, hopefoundation.org.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.